sure I can follow that video.
I know, it's a bit of a transition.
To just shake it off.
Woo. Wow, that was really powerful, wasn't it? Cool. So yeah, now for something completely different. Who knew that there was an International Men's Day? There were a few grads at the back that weren't sure if they'd heard about it before that I was chatting to earlier. So I have been partnering with Daniele Fianduca. He's the founder of Token Man on Masculinity in the Workplace event, which is held on or near International Men's Day every year. This year, International Men's Day falls on a Sunday, so our event is going to be on the Tuesday. But really, the event is the culmination of an interest about kind of what's going on for men at the moment. And I do find that when I start talking about International Men's Day, sometimes this is the reaction that I get. And that was even said in Parliament one day. Surely every day is International Men's Day. What do you think might be problematic about that statement? Why do you think that might not be the most helpful statement always to hear? Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and paternity leave and things like that actually, you know, generally isn't considered when we have this masculine conception of men.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great answer. Thank you. Systemic issues that are facing men. The conversation I was having earlier, there's a lot of us that believe women won't be entirely free until some of these issues around men are resolved or men change their behaviours. And I must admit, I came to this from a bit more of a selfish perspective. I've got two sons, they're now 10 and 11, so I found myself living with my two boys and my husband, being very much in the minority in my household, but kind of thinking, you know, they're not having an easy ride as they go through school at the moment, and the expectations that are on them from quite a young age to, you know, I hear it on the football pitch, man up, don't cry, like stuff that just makes me cringe, and it happens out there. So I mean, there's lots of reasons. Those are really great reasons that you said. But also, I think when we make statements like that, we forget that men are actually intersectional. When we think of men, often we group them all together as white, straight, pale male and stale as a group. But obviously, not all men would fit into that bracket. There's a lot of men out there that might have different identities, and that because of those identities might have additional barriers in the way of success. This is from our event last year where we were lucky enough to have Laura Bates, who's the founder of the Everyday Sexism Project, come and talk to us. And she talked so eloquently about how the problems facing women at the moment, just the other side of the coin, the same coin, are the problems that are facing men at the moment. And so I just thought I'd give you a moment to look at that, and you can see how those issues are completely interlinked with one another. And I think that's just such a powerful slide. Really, really powerful, and just goes to the point we were discussing before about how, I guess, there's systemic issues facing men and women, and for any of us to be free, those issues need addressing. Something else that happened last year is we engaged with some research, and just as we were publishing our research, there was some research in the national press as well. And so these results and these data wasn't a surprise to us, but it might be a surprise to some of you. Nearly half of male employees were kind of showing willing in inclusion and diversity efforts, despite feeling it wasn't relevant to their careers. So that was kind of astonishing, that they didn't see it as critical to their leadership, to the future of their business, which I would absolutely do it, think that way. In the middle there, only 44% of men are seen as being real allies in the workplace. And then this final one was the one that was in the national press. 53% of men in this country, 53% believe that we've gone so far in promoting women's equality that we're discriminating against men. And it's when you get people believing things like that you get some of those really unhelpful behaviours and people siding with some more kind of radical, toxic notions of masculinity, and it becomes really problematic. So Daniele and I believe that engaging men in the inclusion and diversity conversation is absolutely critical. I think it's what everybody should be talking about at the moment, genuinely. And I think we're not going about it very well at the moment, as evidenced by those previous slides. So what we've done is put together kind of a framework which we hope will support you in engaging men in that conversation. I think one of the things we've done wrong is we've gone in at the end there. So we've gone in by talking about allyship and not thinking about those steps that need to come before. My thought was, how do we get men in the room? Well, when we think about feminism and 1970s feminism in particular, that kind of man-hating label has been a little bit difficult to shift. And I think a lot of men have not always felt very welcome in the room. And that's why I was offering massive props to all the guys that are here today. Men haven't always been made to feel welcome in this space. When I field white male facilitators to run a diversity session, they're not always welcomed by the clients that they go and see. So for me, it was about thinking, well, what's in it for them? How can we make them feel like this topic is important for them? So in other words, the first step, I think, is about supporting men in their mental health. So some of the issues the lady at the back was saying about being a dad in the workplace, I mean, it's really invisible, isn't it? Motherhood is really visible in the workplace because of the changes to a mother's body. Then the mum goes out of the office for a while. A dad could become a dad over the weekend and you would see nothing. They might not even tell you. So I think supporting men in some of their everyday life issues around mental health, around being a father, around vulnerability, some of the things that men are struggling with has to be step one, to show that you think this is something for them too. Then I think we can start to build the skills and tools, to be a better manager. So we might be thinking about things like vulnerability, about empathy, compassion, some different skills to bring to the table. And then finally, then we can start to recruit them to become allies. But I personally believe that foundation needs to be done first. So if you're celebrating and actually celebrating might not be the right word. You might want to use the word marking rather than celebrating for International Men's Day. If you're doing that in your company, I just put together some ideas here of what you might be able to do that. Men's mental health. Actually, I was just at Capital Radio. Roman Kemp is doing a phenomenal job at the moment speaking about men's mental health. He's definitely one to look up. But even having a panel of people in your workplace, senior men talking openly about their mental health would be game-changing. At the end of our event last year, James O'Brien, the LBC host, he was talking about mental health, and people, like senior people at Google in the room, started interacting with him, talking about their own mental health. And I was just thinking, I have never, ever seen this happen before. Like literally just hadn't seen it. It was astonishing. So creating that space where you can start men speaking about mental health, making fatherhood visible in the workplace. So maybe it's a panel or maybe it's a group discussion of what are the challenges dads are going through at the moment. I think, and actually this is borne out through personal experience and research, men have a tendency to feel like they should be the provider in those situations. In a time of economic uncertainty, that can be pretty tough. When I left my corporate role to work for myself, I found that quite an easy transition. My husband's done the same thing and found it a lot tougher because he was invested in those ideas of being the provider for the family, quite unconsciously actually. So actually when he is sometimes earning less than me in a month, and it sounds ridiculous, but he wouldn't mind me saying, he finds that challenging, and he knows that his head tells him one thing and his heart tells him another thing. Movember would be another great idea, just supporting a male charity, organising something around that. Then moving on to Inspire, if you had done support first, like please don't start in the middle, start on the left-hand side. Then you might want to start thinking about intersectionality. Men aren't all the same, one homogenous group. They have different challenges and different barriers. Brené Brown's work on vulnerability is awesome. You could do a lunch and learn, show the power of vulnerability TED Talk, have a conversation about it. And whilst it does seem to be women that are most attracted to Brené's work, I think men actually find it harder to be vulnerable in the workplace. We've got all of those constructs, haven't we, about being male and being in control and being together and being with it. I think it's really hard for men to step into their vulnerability, and we're suddenly saying to them, you need to be vulnerable, inclusive leaders are vulnerable. That's quite a big jump we're asking them to make. Empathy, actually I'm going to sound like a big Brené Brown fangirl now, aren't I? There's a really great free video on YouTube which is an RSA short on empathy. It was Brené speaking at Conway Hall, I think, about various topics, including empathy, and they've animated the background. Has anyone seen it? It's like a little bear going in a hole. Yeah. Again, share the video, talk about empathy misses, just provide that space for the safe conversation. And then finally, you can start talking about allyship, I believe, and how asking men to step into different behaviours to support different groups. So our big event is going to be on the 21st of November this year. On the screen here are some of our previous speakers. This year, I haven't been able to put any photos on the screen because we are literally signing contracts this week with our speakers, but I'm allowed to tell you in the room, since it kind of doesn't go any further. So our theme for the year is the power of identity. We believe that that's going to allow us to explore intersectionality. It's going to allow us to explore some of the more troubling things happening around masculinity, like Andrew Tate and so on at the moment. We're going to look at how identity is formed through childhood, and we're going to look at masking identity, and we're going to tackle the thorny issue of privilege as well, but not from a non-shaming perspective, from a, right, we have privilege, what can we do with that type perspective. So the three speakers I can speak about, one of them is Ishan Akbar. He is a comedian, and he gets people to think differently through the medium of comedy. I saw him perform in Hemel Hempstead, who was really, really good. It was brilliant. The second speaker is a psychotherapist called Susie Orbach, and she's going to be looking at how... Oh, I can see you nodding. Was that a good hire? Brilliant. I'm going to be doing a fireside chat with her and just talking about how identity is formed through childhood. You know, I've been working in this space for 10, 12 years now, and even a conversation with her, I was just learning stuff that I had never considered before. It was awesome. And then the final speaker is someone called Matt Lindley, who works in the armed forces. He had to mask his identity as a gay man for a long time whilst he was working, so he's going to talk about the impact of that. But actually what I'm really interested in him talking about is, in the armed forces, if something goes wrong, they... Can I swear here? Probably not, no. They analyse the out of it. If things go wrong in the diversity and inclusion space, what happens? We get shut down, we get no platformed, it's like, you know, push it out the way. He believes that there is scope and space in the diversity, equity and inclusion world to kind of slow down, and when mistakes happen, to kind of sit with them and stare into them a little bit, and so that we can get learning from them, and to stop no platforming and kind of think, right, why are these mistakes happening? What's going on here? And interrogate it a bit more. So that's what I'm super excited about him speaking about. We're still looking for partners for the events. If you think that your organisation wants to... I keep wanting to say celebrate, and I don't want to say that word. Mark International Men's Day, get in touch. The event is going to be at Conway Hall. All partners get tickets to come in person to the event. And then I'm sure through Vanessa, we'll be sending out emails closer to the time showing how you can become a virtual attendee as well. And that's me.